The debating the future of the Democratic Party, the future of the left, why we failed, what we need to do to win, etc. They're factionally infighting after a bad loss, if you want to get the blunt answer. Okay, let's watch.
Today we are going to be speaking with two distinguished gentlemen who have been on the show before. We'll be speaking with Stephen Kenneth Destiny Bennell II, political streamer and debater. And also, he has a much shorter name, Cenk Uygur, host of The Young Turks. So to get us into this conversation, we recently did a poll on our YouTube channel, Unscientific. Does the Democratic Party need to move left or right, or is it fine where it is? 47% of our audience said Democrats should embrace left-wing economic populism and move further to the left. 44% either said that the Democratic Party is perfect the way it is, change nothing, or should move further to the center, deal with issues of crime and immigration in a way that more resembles the way the right talks about it, etc. I think to start with, I just want to hear about your reaction to that and which direction sounds like it's the one we need to go in.
So, David, I know those questions are rough and it's hard to phrase them exactly right, but I think that you put two different things into one question and then hence it becomes misleading. So let me break it down for you. I think that there are three different parts of the Democratic Party now, and they're usually called two different parts, but that's very wrong. So there's the establishment part. I think that's basically the part that Destiny supports. Rah, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, corporate Democrats who will deliver 5 to 10%, and then you're supposed to kiss their ass for it and go, oh my God, you changed my life so much. And it's nothing but propaganda. They do basically almost everything the donors ask them to. That's the loser wing of the party. And I don't mean that in terms of the folks who are advocating for it. God bless, everybody's got every right to advocate for what they believe in. I mean, they are literally losers. Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump, who, is barely in double digits in IQ points. Biden nearly lost. So if you want to keep making that same mistake, a couple of decades later, there'll be no party left. But if we just get the best corporate robot like Pete Buttigieg, maybe he'll be the answer. No, corporate robots are by definition not the answer. So we're in a populist era. We're in an era where online media is stronger now for the first time than mainstream media. Authenticity is rewarded. And so sending out people going, I am doing what the donors asked me to, is a disaster, epic disaster. And you've seen it with your own eyes. So I'm trying to wake people up. Now, when you go to the progressive side, everybody just goes, oh, progressives. But wait a minute, there's two very different camps in there.
Yep.
There's the camp that's Bernie 2016 that I'm in. That's economic populism, left-wing populists. And then there's the identitarian left, which is go maximum on crime doesn't exist. Trans people should be able to play in any professional sports they like. Free surgeries for detainees, on and on and on, right? And so my thesis is not one that's even, I don't even think it's arguable.
I don't even know how much of the left, quote unquote, I think there's an academic language that trickles down into regular people that they don't really like too much. It doesn't meet well, but I don't know how much their rank and file of the Democratic Party is really engaged in that. I think there's some special interest groups that are engaged in that type of language, and then it dribbles down to the rank and file of the party or to working class people who are not accustomed to that language. They don't like it, and it might scare them off. But I don't know how big of an issue it really is. I think it might be a bigger issue with maybe trying to attract people with online commentary than it is the party apparatus itself. Maybe to some extent, but I don't know. Not sold.
Let alone controversial. The corporate wing and the identitarian left wing proved to be a spectacular failure in this election. Clearly the popular wing, and by the way, this is not a matter in dispute. You can just look at the polling. So the identitarian left says defund the police is going to poll really well. Latinx is going to poll really well, except it doesn't. It polls disastrously, right? And the corporate wing says, oh, me kissing the ass of corporations is going to poll really well. And it doesn't. It never does, right? But when you look at the populist left, you've got paid family leave, you've got $15 minimum wage, you've got lowering drug prices, on and on and on. universal health care, they all polled 2/3 or higher. So why not do the thing that's popular? So this is, and of course, there's a reason why they don't. And it's because the whole thing is built on money, 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 money. I mean, the first thing that Joe Biden took out of the first COVID relief bill was the $15 minimum wage. He was lying about it from day one. He buried that. And why? It's super, it was, again, polling over 2/3. Why would you take that out? Why wouldn't you let the Republicans defeat it if they're going to defeat it, and then use it as a tool against them to win elections? The reason you don't do any of that is because your donors ordered you not to do that.
Destiny, about to that point, Bernie Sanders said shortly after the election, I'm paraphrasing, of course the working class abandoned Democrats because Democrats abandoned the working class. Do you think there's truth to that critique from Bernie?
No, of course not. It's, I mean, like again, the reality is incumbent parties all over the world lost.
Let me hear that again from Bernie.
After the election, I'm paraphrasing. Of course, the working class abandoned Democrats because Democrats abandoned the working class. Do you think there's truth to that critique from Bernie?
No, of course not.
I think there is. I think there is truth to it. I think we passed more, but we needed bold visions for change that were easy to sell to the public and not policy wonkery about a $25,000 down payment, a first-time home buyer. What if you're not a first-time home buyer? What if you're a renter, which many people are? What if you already own a home? It's going to be difficult. What if you had one passed to your kids, passed down to you? This is going to be hard. I think a lot of it was like policy wonkery. They got too into the specifics when honestly, the thing that appealed to people about Bernie were big mandates for change. And if she wanted to separate herself from Biden while not just trashing the previous administration and therefore undercutting her ability to claim previous accomplishments, she had to offer some big ideas for change. And I think like the biggest one was like marijuana decriminalization and legalization, which was announced really close to the buzzer, and was racialized in a way which I understand why they did it due to polling and like amongst black men, but was racialized in a way that it didn't need to be necessarily when it was originally being sold. And if they had more time, they could have rolled it out better. But that's like a Biden not dropping out issue, and them not getting not jumping on it too quick.
Not. It's, I mean, like the reality.
I mean, like healthcare. We didn't hear anything about healthcare this election. She could have completely jumped on that, especially after I've got the concept of a plan. Well, here's my plan. Here's my new bold plan. Just talking about what you've accomplished so far when people are still suffering under the accomplishments that you've had, even with those accomplishments, because a lot of these positive economic indicators are going to be things you see over 15 years. You're going to need to offer something bold and big.
Is incumbent parties all over the world lost. Like in every single country, the incumbent party lost.
This is also true.
Lost vote share, lost seats in parliament, lost their elected leaders. I mean, like it was a referendum on inflation worldwide. We all felt it. And inflation is the thing that you feel the cumulative effects of. So there you go. I mean, like when has there ever been a president in recent history that has been better for labor than Joe Biden? And is Trump going to be better for labor than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris would have been? Like, there's no policy.
It's not a question of just not liking Trump. It's a question of also turning out the people in your base. And if it's just like, we've gotten these accomplishments, Trump is this bad, vote for him because we've gotten some of the things, even though not all the things, you need to be able to offer more. You need to be able to offer more. The PRO Act was good. Honestly, the union stuff is the stuff that bothers me the most. Because Biden really did deliver, I think, the most when it comes to having a pro-labor NLRB, National Labor Relations Board. They did try to push through the PRO Act, but they did not get it through. I think there has to be a real reevaluation of whether or not the best way to communicate with union workers is through the union. That's not to say we don't give up that in its entirety, but how many paying union members are actually going to all the union meetings?
Foundation in that statement. And then to Cenk's point, I guess like this is the eternal mystery for progressives is that, and I've argued with so many on this, their candidates are supposedly the most popular, just nobody knows it yet, and all the positions that they have are the most popular positions, then why do their candidates lose all their elections? Even when they're outspending opponents, they lose their elections. Why? Where are all of these progressive candidates taking Congress by storm, that are so popular and have all these popular positions? And then I'm curious what Cenk will say, but I will head off one response because I know it's going to be, well, it's because the party's opposed to them and the corporate donors. The party hated Donald Trump when he ran in 2016. Republicans hated Donald Trump when he ran in 2016. It wasn't the billionaire class and it wasn't the donor class. He genuinely got a lot of support from the party, and he eventually rose up through the ranks and he became popular and he became the nominee. And I think that if there was a progressive candidate, they could at least be winning their local races. But I mean, I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, Cenk, you're shaking your head. How do you see it?
Yeah. So first, I love talking about worldwide elections because I think it goes to exactly the point I'm making. Candidates that are for the status quo are losing everywhere. And what's interesting is they keep going. I don't get it. Brazil went left, then right, then left. UK went left, then right, then left. What's going on here? Are they left or are they right? They're not left or right. What the voters are doing is voting for change and voting for populism. And so that is your Rosetta Stone. That will tell you if the right winger or the left winger is going to win. And so even Macron was a new party when he won in stunning fashion. Then he did the standard thing that everybody else does, and then they voted against him because then he became the status quo. What is the status quo that the whole world is vomiting out right now? That's neoliberal policies. Give all the money to the very top, and don't worry, it'll trickle all over you many decades from now. People on the left, we've been fighting against this ideology for decades. But now our leaders have been co-opted by the donor class, and they say the same goddamn thing. And that's why we're losing these elections. It's not a matter of whether Donald Trump is better for labor than Kamala Harris. Of course not. But the question is, in the primary, is a candidate like Bernie Sanders better than Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris on labor? And the answer is obviously. So go.
Hillary Clinton is better than Trump on labor, but she was going to pick like the CEO of Starbucks to head the NLRB. Obviously, she was not strong enough.
Towards labor, go towards change. So look, even within this election, guys, it was a perfect microcosm. When Kamala Harris first came out, Anna and I on the Young Turks said, oh my God, she's running a brilliant campaign. We're on tape saying that. Why? She came out.
John Brown Enthusiast has donated $5. Biggest thing I don't see a single one of these loss understanders say is that Americans are being stupid and ignorant and vote against their interests and are lazy AF.
I mean, like, obviously, education is an issue, and I'm not just gonna... Don't just blame the voter. If you just blame the voter, then you remove all responsibility from yourself, you're shifting the blame onto somebody else, and then, like, after 4 years, you change nothing, you're gonna run into the same wall. But of course, like, education is important, and if people knew the effect of a 20% tariff on all goods imported to the United States, some people think, oh, I'll just buy American shares. Okay, if you're talking about complex machine parts, do you think every single one of those pieces for that machine is made in the United States? It's not just about the completed components, it's also about the inner components that make up the machine. That's where you run into an issue. And so after the election, people went to Google, and more than the entirety of the election, people started Googling, wait, what is a tariff? Because their workplaces started talking to them about the reality of what a tariff could mean to them. They were starting to figure it out, and then it spiked after the election, after when that information would have been most useful. And now Trump is picking big tariff people, big champions of tariffs, to important cabinet positions. And so I think there's a real chance that he actually starts firing off on these tariffs, which are going to be counterproductive for a lot of the economic goals that he is setting for himself.
Out as an economic populist in the beginning. She went after corporations doing price gouging. She went after the housing prices. She was addressing the economic needs of the average man. And then she picked Tim Walz, the most populist of any of the potential candidates. And then she took what was, Joe Biden was down in the polling anywhere from 2 to 8 points nationally. She eventually sprung up to 7 points ahead nationally. She had it, and on the show I said if the election were held today, she'd win, and that was true. And then a giant turnaround, and she lost the lead entirely and lost the election. What was the turnaround? Her brother-in-law, Tony West, who's a corporate lawyer for Uber, convinced her to kiss the ass of corporations and that was a brilliant political strategy. So what did she do? She put out a letter of 90 corporate CEOs backing her. And she started bragging about all the corporate CEOs are on my side. All the corporate CEOs are on my. I'm like, stop. You're doing terrible damage, right? And then she had Mark Cuban go on every cable news show. Now, guys, remember, she's in favor of big business. Don't worry, big business. She loves big business. Then Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, all the wrong direction. And she lost the lead and she lost the election. It's right there. It happened right in front of
I think there is some appeal to trying to dissuade a moderate Republican from voting for Trump, maybe even voting for Harris, or even, if you can't get that, having him stay home. And I understand the critique of going with somebody like Liz Cheney, which is fair. She should probably have not been on the campaign trail as much with Harris as she was. But it's also like, you don't get to always choose your allies. Sometimes the allies you have are the allies you have. I'm sure, like someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger would have probably polled better, and maybe running around with him would have been better. But you don't always get to choose who's willing to do that.
of your eyes. So now this idea that the establishment wing uses, just because we spend billions of dollars against your progressive candidates, and we have all of mainstream media lying and doing propaganda on our behalf and saying there are no donor class. The donor class doesn't affect anything. Oh my God, the billions they took in donations from corporations, it doesn't affect anyone. No, Bernie Sanders is the real problem. He's going to execute people in Central Park. Oh my God, if he actually serves the average American, it's going to be terrible. Everybody unite against him, right? And you guys all saw it with your own eyes. Think about it. In 2013, when Bernie Sanders was polling at 1% against Hillary Clinton, I did a video on the Young Turks saying that brother could actually beat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 primary. Why did I say that? Not because of Bernie. Bernie's a great guy. He means well, etc. He's got his faults like everybody does. But it's because I sensed a massive populist energy in the country, and he went from 1% to 48%. So why did he not get over the hump and get to 52%? Because the minute he got into the 40s, they went from ignoring him to he's going to execute people in Central Park. His followers are brown shirts. He's anti-Semitic. He's this, he's that. He's terrible. So yeah, with all of the media and all of the money against you, it's a little harder to win. If you don't.
So this is my thing. I agree that there was a rally around the flag moment, and they kind of circled the wagons to try to stop Bernie. In what way will be disputed. Donna Brazile giving Hillary the questions in advance is probably one of the most condemnable examples of that. But also, like, Bernie was challenging the establishment. You should expect the establishment to bite back. Like, when there was Trump was able to overcome all of the obstacles, including people who were fighting him to the end, to the point where the establishment was like, we'll take Ted Cruz over Trump, and everybody doesn't like Ted Cruz. So, but he still overcame it. Bernie didn't. That's a problem, and we need to figure out why.
Acknowledge that you're just being intellectually dishonest.
Do you acknowledge that, Destiny?
Hold on. Last thing. But despite all that, I helped to co-found Just Democrats. We launched it on the Young Turks, and everybody told me there's like maybe you'll get one. We got 11 people rejecting corporate PAC money into Congress. It was stunning, and we had one of the most stunning political upsets literally in American history when AOC beat Crowley, and we did that with almost no money. Okay, so even with overwhelming odds against us, anything that is remotely just a 5% fair playing field and we win. Imagine if we had the party infrastructure with us rather than against us.
So Destiny, address any of that you want, but specifically Cenk's answer to your question about why aren't the progressives winning if the ideas are so popular, that Cenk said, which is when Bernie got into the 40s, the entire apparatus gets aligned against him.
I mean, it becomes an unfalsifiable claim. Like, it might just be that Bernie was just too far to the left for what the Democratic Party was ready to handle, which you would expect to see reflected in the media and in the people. I, I mean, it becomes unfalsifiable. You can have elections where like Nina Turner is spending a ton of money and she still loses. You can have elections where the progressives are spending a lot of money and there's always a reason. It's either a new corporate donor or a new media is being biased or a new whatever. You know, all the media hated Trump. That didn't stop him in 2016. The Republican Party hated Trump. That didn't stop him in 2016. I think that at some point, like progressives will have to understand that it takes more than just, you know, screaming about the most leftist populist policies ever to get elected. We talk about like the world had a referendum on neoliberalism. No, it was just a referendum on incumbent parties. And sometimes when you vote for it, people see that it doesn't even work out. You know, it was a whole bunch of populism that moved to Brexit, and that hasn't worked out well for the UK at all. So now they're kind of trending back in the other direction. And if anything, a lot of the rejection, especially through Europe, and a lot of the reasons why those countries are tending right, have to do with fallouts from the refugee crisis still, and all of the migrants fleeing into Europe still. So I mean, like this idea that the world wants these, you know, hollow, empty populist leaders that at the end of the day don't even have great policies for them. And again, for some reason, where are they? Why are they not taking over Congress? Like, where are all of these people in Congress? You know, we had the Justice Sims that came in originally, which was awesome. But there was, I don't remember this exactly, but I remember I looked up the stat because they went from saying that like only 10% of our candidates won to like 90% of our candidates. The Justice Sims went from supporting, I think, like 70 plus candidates one season to the next election cycle, like 6. And, you know, if there was so much of this populist energy, why aren't they being elected everywhere? Like they're still representing a minority opinion in the party.
Destiny, I want to stick with you for a second. Before the election, you tweeted, if Kamala ends up winning, the entire far left, the commies, tankies, Hamas supporters, etc., need to be By
the way, I think like when you say why aren't they winning, some of them don't have the infrastructure in place. They're really bad at making the infrastructure. Some of them are too busy fighting with each other. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. I don't think it's just that, oh, they're just not popular enough. I think there is popularity for the policy positions, but maybe not the personalities involved. And of course, it takes time to build up a movement. But I think if given the right foundation, given the right organizing, I do think that the progressive left could become a bigger faction within the Democratic Party.
Jettisoned from the...
I don't know if it would become the majority of the Democratic Party, but I think it could become a bigger faction with more influence, at the very least.
Party. We don't need them to win. We can turn out our own base, and they are an absolute effing cancer to be associated with. Given Trump's victory, and whatever it means to you, do you stand by that?
Yeah, 1 trillion%. I think that having to answer for having to, well, but I mean, I represent far more of the party than the far left does.
Apparently you don't. Apparently you represent the loser wing.
You can lose like every progressive candidate that is running in all of their elections that are being tossed. They lose their primaries. They lose their actual elections. Like they're losers. They're by definition, they're losers. The issue is that one is the lefty media sphere will never, ever support a candidate that is electable in the mainstream. They just won't. They turned on Bernie Sanders and they turned on AOC. Even those people aren't far left enough for the insanity that is the far left online now. So trying to kowtow to this like group of people who want to see like an actual communist or like this like anti-capitalist or this like just somebody that's too far left that most European countries probably wouldn't even support in leadership. It's just an unrealistic proposition unless they can actually prove, you know, some of their, I guess, merit at more local levels or even like in congressional levels rather than just like for the presidential race. That's number one. And number two, that media sphere is toxic and we have to pretend that they're part of the in-group. Again, a big benefit that Trump enjoys is when he gets attacked, Trump can run this whole media circuit on the right where every single person is sycophantically obsessed with him. He doesn't have to answer any attacks. He can sit there and attack the other side endlessly and relentlessly, and there's no accountability. And then you know, you're Kamala Harris or you're, you know, the Democratic candidate, it's like, okay, well, going on the right platforms is very difficult because these people are going to, you know, rake me over the coals. And then I go to the left platforms. These people all call me corporate sellouts, you know, donor class, whatever. Okay, well, Jesus, I've got my center left media, but they're so obsessed with trying to be fair and balanced and to try to not be, not have like Trump derangement syndrome that they're going to hold me like ultra accountable. So you have these wacky, unbelievable moments where people like Walz and Vance are on stage. And the question for Walz is, didn't you lie 20 or 30 years ago about the months you were in Taiwan? And then the question for Vance is like, did you really mean it when you said you would also overturn like the next election? And we have to pretend that these two things are even. It's just ridiculous. The Democrat establishment and then the Democratic media sphere needs to do a better job at like reinforcing the voting for the in-group, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is getting your candidate elected. You can do all the activism on Twitter or whatever you want, but if you're not pushing for electable candidates to get elected, then you're engaging.
Elections are about winning. Elections are about winning. If you don't win, you don't get to have any policy impact whatsoever. It's true. It's about winning, stupid. Winning. I want to win. I want to win. I'd like to win. Wouldn't you guys like to win? I'd like to win.
In slacktivism.
Cenk, feel free to respond to that however you want, but I would love to hear you address the issue Destiny's bringing up about the asymmetry when it comes to the media ecosystems. And it's not about if she had done Rogan, she would have won. I don't believe that. I don't think there's any evidence of that. But generally, the question of the media ecosystem.
Yeah, so lots of thoughts here. First off, why could Trump overcome it and Bernie couldn't? You're leaving out the fact that Trump was an enormous celebrity, and they literally gave him over $1 billion in free media as he was running on the Republican side. Whereas,
well, I will say Trump is as much love as I had for Bernie. I went to South Carolina to canvass for the man. I supported him in 2016. I supported him in 2020. Honestly, if he ran again, I don't care how old he is. There's a good chance I'd support him again. Trump knows the media much better. He has a deeper experience with the media and was able to play into it to get their attention much better. Bernie was a crotchety old man from Vermont, polling 1% nationally, who clawed himself up to prominence due to how he came off as authentic. He came off as your authentic policy wonk grandpa who's the top 0.1% of the top 1%. And he did that, and he came off like he cared. He gave radical big policy proposal which catched attention, which was a much more break with the standard. He was willing to call out people like Henry Kissinger that Hillary Clinton would not because he was her friend. And I think that he was able to grab onto some things, but he doesn't have all the same tools in the tool belt that Trump had. I think if he had that knowledge of media experience and he approached it differently, maybe he could have. But, that was the past and today is now.
Bernie Sanders got, in his miraculous run to catch Hillary Clinton that started in 2015, where he went from 1 point to basically about 48 percentage points, ABC covered him for 7 seconds, the whole year, 7 seconds. So that's what mainstream media does, because they're literally corporate media. They're multi-billion-dollar corporations. So they hate actual populists like Bernie Sanders. Fake populists like Donald Trump. Oh, it's a clown show. We're having fun. Give him a couple of $1 billion.
Bob Cicero got a tier 1 subscription. Da millionaires and da billionaires.
The millionaires and the billionaires. Thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. I love some old Bernie speeches. Can we do the quick, just out of respect for the Burnster, okay? Bernie Bird. This moment's great.
Now, you see, this little bird doesn't know it. Oh.
Old Bernie core.
Free media and see how it turns out. Well, it turned out very poorly. And there's a conflation here between mainstream media and left-wing media. I think that the question on the debate stage that Destiny is referring to, yeah, totally outrageous, asymmetrical, ridiculous. Those two things are not comparable. That's mainstream media doing false equivalency. That's not the kind.
Ellen, that was a good impression. It was okay. I'm bad at impressions, but Bernie's fun.
Conversation that we're having here. We're very, very far from mainstream media. So in terms of what went wrong with the Just Democrats real quick, and then I'll come back to what should left-wing media do. So in the beginning, when the co-founders were running it, that's when we ran to 70 candidates and we were very successful. Unfortunately, all of us kind of left the building for different reasons. And then the new management decided they were going to run only a small number of races. But to be fair to them, they actually won a very high percentage of those races in the second time around. That's how they were able to build up from 4 to 11. So there's good arguments, political strategy-wise, for either direction. But what really took the steam out of Just Democrats is that the founders wanted AOC and the others to go in a populist left direction, an economically populist direction. And instead, that's very, very difficult. The reason why it's so difficult is because their colleagues get so mad at them if they talk about money in politics, because then they all go, are you saying Hakeem Jeffries is corrupt just because he took all this money from the oil companies, the drug companies, the banks, AIPAC, every other lobbyist? You better not be mean to your colleagues. So they powered down on our most popular positions, and they went identitarian left instead. But that is extreme. So that's why Destiny's conflating those two things. And I think, I'm not saying Destiny's doing this, but I think that a lot of people in media almost do that on purpose. A lot of them don't know. They just think progressives means both of those things at the same time. And then they just say, oh, they're all unpopular. And a lot of times, especially mainstream media, they'll go, defund the police, Latinx, universal health care. Wait, one of those things does not belong on that list. Universal health care pulls it over 70%. So you've got to separate out those.
Latinx policy. I love that policy. The Latinx policy. Everyone shall be Latinx.
Those two wings. Anyone who's been economically populist has done a terrific job. For example, Tim Walz. We all like Tim Walz, right? Every wing of the Democratic Party likes Tim Walz. Well, Tim Walz was an economic populist, got a lot of things passed in Minnesota.
True.
And was rewarded for it and was very, very popular in Minnesota.
True, and he did it with a slim majority, which why Tim Walz being VP for Harris admin, that's one of the few things I was excited for, because he is somebody who's able to get a lot done with a slim majority, and if we had a slim majority in the House and Senate, that left open options.
Minnesota, because he delivered for the average guy, including paid family leave, and which is actually very, very easy to pass. It's at 84% approval. It's just that the corporate wing goes, yes, I know. It would make us popular. It would help our voters. It's what we promised. It's super easy to pass, but we don't want to because our donors told us not to. Well, that's a wing that's going to get clobbered throughout the rest of time. That's the neoliberal wing. And the idea that the world is not under neoliberal rule right now is absurd. Of course we are. All the countries are under neoliberal corporate rule. And that's why the voters are rebelling against all of them. So what's the media supposed to do? Now, online media, corporate media is going to corporate media. They're always going to tell you whoever takes the most donor money is the greatest. They're leading the race with $1 billion in bribes. Bravo, bravo, terrific job, corporate Democrat, corporate Republican. And remember, guys, Trump beat the corporate Republicans. Like, you guys make it seem like, oh, hey, people are in favor of Republicans, or their voters are still. No, their voters rejected their corporate wing. And it came with a lot of baggage we're not happy with, right? But you have to give them a little bit of credit for actually, not for supporting Trump, who I think is a fake populist, but for at least rejecting Mitch McConnell, rejecting all those guys. So on our side, we say, oh, Mitch McConnell took $1 billion in corporate money throughout his career, terrible, evil, corrupt guy. Nancy Pelosi took a same $1 billion from very similar donors, did exactly what they wanted, just like Mitch McConnell. Terrific, angel, wonderful. Yeah, you could think that, and you could do all the marketing in the world for rah, Nancy Pelosi. But at the end of the day, the American people woke up, and they know that the $1 billion, whether it goes to a Republican or a Democrat, is corruption defined. So what we should do is we should have strong primaries and really challenge our candidates, because this whole idea of anointing, how's that working out for us? So we were supposed to trust the geniuses in Democratic leadership. Oh my God, they're playing four-dimensional chess. We'll never figure out what they're doing. They're so smart. Really? Even under Obama. Okay, Obama won a couple of times, and that's a long history, and we can talk about how selfish he was. But in the meanwhile, while he was in office, the Democrats lost 1,000 seats nationwide. And by the way, the guy most responsible for that was Rahm Emanuel. And now the corporate Democrats are saying, let's bring back Rahm Emanuel to lose another 1,000 seats. Are you insane? And then they said, oh, we have to anoint Hillary Clinton. How did that turn out? We have to anoint Joe Biden. We have to anoint Kamala Harris. And by the way, Biden only won by 43,000.
Joe Biden wasn't anointed. They did rally around the wagon midterm, though. Once it was clear it was going to be Bernie Biden.
1,000 votes to 3 swing states. They nearly lost to this imbecile 3 times. Look, you can't say someone has despotic tendencies, is a fascist, is a moron, is the worst guy in the world, and then lose to him 2 times and say, you should put me back in charge because I know what I'm doing.
That's
no,
true.
They have proven definitively that they do not know what they're doing.
That's true.
Destiny, go ahead.
I mean, there's nothing to say. Like, progressives have nothing to show for their record. They have like bad polling, like that 70-80% of Americans support single payer healthcare. That's not true. We've done the polling on this over and over and over again. If you poll in the most favorable manner, they support it. If you poll for what it actually is, that support plummets to like 25%.
That's not remotely true.
It is absolutely true. I don't remember if it was
You're arguing against Democratic policies. It's amazing. Why don't you just join the Republican Party?
So
let
arguing
me just
about whether or not the policy is good or bad. Well,
if I can interject one thing here.
Yeah, go ahead.
From what I've seen, the polling Cenk mentions does exist, around 70-75% support. The polling I've seen with what we might call more specific wording, it's not that support drops to 25%, but I have seen it drop to more like 48 to 50%. I do think a lot of it's complicated because if you just ask someone, does the government have a basic level of responsibility to give people some health care? Most people say yes, and also a lot of them don't necessarily know what that means. I don't know that we're going to solve whether it's a good policy based on 3 different polls that ask it in a different way. I don't know. I've seen the polling.
Well, no, yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that, like, if you want to actually pass any policy or do anything, you have to have an actual realistic understanding of what it is Americans even think before you even begin to go down the path of how do we implement it. And the reality is single payer healthcare. When you ask somebody, do you think the government should provide health insurance for people? That polls incredibly well.
Yes.
When you ask, should the government be the second question? There were all 3 of these were listed in a. I
remember the one that really was bad, but was the banning of private insurance companies. Was making it so you put everybody on the public option to pull from the public option, so you can make it that wealth is not a way to get better healthcare coverage than somebody else. That wealth should not be a determinant factor in whether you're getting better or worse healthcare coverage. That, well, you can make like a moral equality, or that polled terribly. Terribly. And I don't think it should be a priority anyway. And if it's not sold well, you just don't include it.
I remember the name of
the priority should be getting as many people healthcare as soon as possible. That should be the priority, to save lives. Not like cutting the wealthy out of their healthcare plans if they really want to put their money into that.
Polling firm, but this is around.
I think it's the Kaiser Family Foundation that
it might be that. There's a second way of asking it that's more neutral. Of like, do you think that the government should be do you think that the government should be able to offer insurance or something for all levels? Something like that. But then the third question is, should the government be the sole provider of insurance and ban private insurance? And that one is incredibly unpopular. I think that's
the ban private insurance. It's like, even countries that have universal systems, they don't ban, most of them don't ban private insurance. So I don't even know why that would be included necessarily.
Because that's what Bernie's plan was. Bernie's plan for healthcare was the furthest left plan of any country that would have ever existed on the face of the earth. There is no other plan.
Not true. And B, you really sound like a Republican.
That's great, like but I actually read the policy, okay? So Bernie Sanders' plan included things like no copay for drugs and covered things like vision and dental and provided for a single
no copay for drugs, honestly. And vision and dental? Oh my gosh! Woo! Let me calm down a bit. I'm sorry. Is that supposed to be bad? Look, maybe. For me, it's a captive market. If you're dealing with people with these healthcare issues, it's a captive market. I think these types of things, at the end of the day, once we reach the end of the tunnel, in my world, it'd be better if they were covered.
Means of both insurance and I believe delivery medicine throughout the entire country. I'm
not saying we're going to get there tomorrow. I don't think we implement everything all at once. I think you take steps forward, but he says that like it's a negative.
More left than any other medical plan on the planet. I do agree with what you're saying, Pakman, that there are multi-payer systems. I'm a big fan of either a public option or even a single-payer system, depending on how you administer it. I think it's fine. Medicare expansion, all things are fine. But you have to be honest about, like, where is the electorate at? How do they feel about these things? And you can't just constantly blame donors and billionaires and even like this huge cope of calling Trump a fake populist. Trump is as populist as they come. He is one man against the system who's telling you that he's going to fight and take it all down as one person against all the corrupt donors and everything else. This is as populist as they possibly come. Populists become dictators. This is what populism is. It's the precursor to things like fascism or authoritarian regimes. You always get these like strong, brave men.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. Do things that are unpopular.
I mean,
I would look. I'm sorry, but like, I don't like just appeals to populism. I don't like just appeals to things that are popular. And as of recent, I've gotten such a worse and a worse and a worse and a worse opinion of populism. Just to see how people, like, for example, like Cenk Uygur's posts about the long-range strikes. Like, it was just a blatant appeal to populism. There was no moral argument. There was no strategic argument. There was no policy argument there. It was just neocons like it, bad. The left and the right, not huge fans of it. Therefore, bad. It was not. That is when populism degrades your brain. It takes away your ability to think for yourself.
He's winning elections on it, so yeah. And then
go ahead, Destiny.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you ruined my train of thought. Go ahead.
Sorry. The last thing I wanted to ask
Pakman
about.
ruined my train of thought.
The last thing I wanted to ask about involves sort of both of you on Twitter. Cenk, you kind of went mega viral for responding to Elon Musk and saying, hey, put me in charge of slashing that Pentagon budget. Elon actually replied. He asked for suggestions. Don Jr. replied something like, this is being considered, or it was considered. Destiny, you responded to the entire thing by saying sigh, S-I-G-H. I think my first question to you, Cenk, is, do you think they genuinely want to cut defense spending, or this entire Department of Grifty Edgelords thing is just really about cutting social programs at the end of the day? Or do you really think the Pentagon is something they would cut?
So let's look at this conversation, right? So
we're gonna get around. We're gonna take the long way to that answer.
So why do I call Trump a fake populist? Because he goes rah-rah average man, which I think is smart political strategy, because he's focusing on things that are popular. That's what populism is. Wow, that's rocket science to figure that out, is to the correct electoral strategy. But then when he gets into office, what's his number one priority? Corporate tax cuts and delivering for his donors like Miriam Adelson. He put in Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Mike Waltz, Mike Huckabee, all Team Miriam, neocon war hawks. So what happened? I thought you were anti-war. And part of what I'm doing here is some of the right-wing populists actually do agree with us on some issues. So, for example, anti-corruption. When I point out that Miriam Adelson gave Trump $137 million, and then he gave her 4 appointees, people, even on the right wing, go, yeah, that sucks. And that, we don't agree with Trump there. And that's a stunning turn of events. I've never seen that happen before, but it's actually genuinely happening online, and you should give them some credit for that. Now, on cutting, what I'm asking is, do you guys really mean it? And so if you really mean it, most of the corruption is in the Pentagon. So that's where all the pork goes, because if you question that pork, they go, you're endangering our national security. You're putting all of our lives on the line, et cetera. So they stuff it full of pork. So I said, look, guys, if you're going to do cuts, let's start at the Pentagon. I can cut $400 billion overnight for you. And what it's doing is putting them to the test. Do you really mean it or don't you? And so a couple of surprising things happen from there. First of all, if you look at my comment section, right-wing populists actually do mean it. So this is going to be really, really interesting. So then Elon and Don Jr. say, yeah, we mean it too. And
okay, when you say they mean it, number one, Elon is going to be running an advisory agency of Donald Trump, somebody who's constantly like, I want the biggest, baddest motherfucking army on the planet. I want killers. I want killers. Bomb the families of terrorists. Do this, do that. He wants the biggest bad. You think someone like that's gonna be like, yeah, I'm gonna downsize my armed forces? No, I just don't believe it. I just don't buy it. I think he wants the biggest, baddest aircraft carriers. And I mean, I do not believe that he's gonna downsize the Pentagon. I don't. I'm even crazy. I just don't believe it. You can advise it all you want, but I just don't believe it's gonna happen.
Follow through on at least one of the proposals that I mentioned, which was,
imagine you bring 3 proposals to Trump. You have a small aircraft carrier, a medium-sized aircraft carrier, and you got the balls to the wall. It's gonna microwave your food. It's gonna blow away your opponents. It's like he's gonna go to the last one every time. Maybe I'm reading Trump wrong, but that's how I read Trump. That's how I read Trump.
Hey, a lot of these contracts go to these defense contractors because the generals, after they retire, go to work for those defense contractors. And that gives them an incentive to sell us out and to buy all these bloated programs, because they're literally going to get paid by those same companies. And if they say, yes, you're right, which is where they are today, and we should stop that, so that conflict of interest, well, that's a left-wing position that we've been arguing for 20 years. I'll take it. That's fantastic. And that's the unity that mainstream media pretended that they were in favor of, but only when they were doing corporate deals for tax cuts for the rich, etc. Now we have some potential actual unity. At the same time, I'm not a sucker. I've been in this game a long time. So is it possible that they don't cut the Pentagon and instead they cut social spending? Of course, that's more likely, right? But at least the very first conversation we're having online about what to cut is the Pentagon. Perfect. You can't ask for anything better from the left-wing populist way of looking at it.
So, Destiny, tell us about the reason for the sigh. Is it that you think Cenk's being naive, that they're not really going to cut, or that he's barking up the wrong tree here?
I don't think they plan on cutting. I don't even like the conversation. I feel like there's so many issues I have with this. When progressives and really with anybody talks about taxes or anybody talks about budgets, like the conversation, people always talk about like taxes, like they're either this like tool of punishment or self-flagellation, or it's like this noble way of. I think that we should figure out what are the government programs that we want to fund and why. Okay. So do we want single payer healthcare? Do we want expansion of Medicare? Do we want to do SNAP and WIC and benefits programs? Do we want to have tax subsidies for electric cars and solar? Like we figure these things out. Once we figure that out, we have our liabilities. Okay. This is how much we owe. And then we need to figure out how do we raise the money for it. Okay. Do we tax people? Do we tariff? Do we whatever? Like how does the government fund these programs? That should be the totality of the conversation about taxes. These arbitrary obsessions with like, we got to slash the Pentagon by X dollars. We have to slash the military. Like, why? What do you want to cut? Like, let's talk about that. Was the F-35 program a mistake? Do we want to have, no military presence around the world? Do we shut down all of our bases? Do we want to have no more funding towards any type of participation? Like, what do we actually want to cut? Because the random thing, like imagine, and it's so crazy to me too, especially because like Cenk is a business owner and all these other guys are business owners. You walk in, you ask, okay, I come into your business.
This is a good question. What do you want to cut? Because when people talk about the F-35 program, there are countries ordering F-35s right now. The F-35 is built. It's been designed. It's there. The F-35 is there. Countries want the F-35. It's not like you can just reverse the F-35. You would be talking about future programs that are expensive or ongoing that are not seeing much progress. Like, so you can't really talk about the F-35 program anymore. The F-35 program's already spent all that money,
and you want to cut things like I'm going to cut 40% of my budget. You just fire randomly like 40% of your employees, or like, no, well, you look at departments maybe that aren't making money. You look at parts of your business maybe you don't need, but it's never just like randomly like, okay, we're going to cut half our thing today, unless you.
That's how Vivek talks about cuts. I remember Vivek said, we're going to put all the names in a hat and we're going to pull out the names. He was just like, we're just going to flip a coin for each person. And we'll choose whether to keep them or fire. It was crazy. It was just all just marketing gimmicks. He was able to market himself up into the Trump circle.
Got like a loan that's being called in and you have to pay up or something. So I mean, like that's one part of it. The second part of it is it's okay. So to be fully transparent, I'm unhinged now when it comes to dealing with conservatives. I'm more concerned about turning out base than ever appealing to these insane people. There is no principled foundation to what conservatives believe regarding anything having to do with foreign policy or the military. The exact same people who will say there were no wars under Trump will ignore the fact that he hid how much more we were drone striking people in Yemen. People will say there were no more wars under Trump, and they'll ignore the fact that we allowed, the allies that we had in Syria to die. We'll say no more wars under Trump. We'll ignore the fact that Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, that the United States bombed.
That was a weird reaction from Cenk. That way, like, does he think we should have withdrew from northeastern Syria and had... Like, that expanded the war. If you're anti-war, like, you can't just acknowledge it's just creating power vacuums with no plan. Like, it doesn't help anyone, right? He doesn't think that was a good move. To just pull out, pull back in, pull out, pull back in. Just, like, having no... Dylan, tankish, Turkish? No, it can't be as simple as, like, what do you mean? Erdogan went in there to destroy the PKK? No, there's no, I don't believe that.
Bombed a Syrian airport.
I don't believe it. The Young Turks network would do that.
Report that Assad was chemically gassing his people still, that border riots were raging on in the Gaza Strip. Like, it's just, it's ridiculous. So for the first time ever, Russian troops were engaging with Ukrainian troops directly in the Donbass, I think in 2018. This idea that, like...
That's... What? What the fuck is he talking... What is Destiny talking about? What the fuck is he talking about? That happened, like, back... 2014, 2015, like, What is it? I have no clue what he's talking about there. The first time it engaged, like the Donbass rebels were about the. Oh, do I have this up somewhere? Oh man, I had like the full, like mapped out list of dates somewhere of like when the Russians like directly intervened. But no, man, it was like the. Let me. Like this was yeah, no, this happened like way back. Back in 2014, man. The Ukrainians were ready to win this battle. Then the Russians sent in their troops, surrounded them, and decimated retreating soldiers. It was the most deadly day for the armed forces of Ukrainian military history, and I still think that's true to this day. Yeah, no, and then after they signed a ceasefire, they kept advancing. This was back in 2014. The Russians have been invading Ukraine for over 10 years. I don't know where Destiny says 2018. I have no clue where he got that number.
Trump has some allegiance to some.
Wasn't it proxies and then actual soldiers later in the Donbass? It was proxies and then it was just actual soldiers in the Donbass. Like once the proxies were not enough. I mean, they were invading. They'd remove the patches from the uniforms and go in. I think it was properly documented for the first time in 2018 to 2019. I just don't know what he's referring to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, I just have no clue what he's referring to.
Some foreign policy position where it's like, oh, we're going to cut military spending is absolutely not true.
Well, even more so
yeah.
then. I mean, if that's true and they'll consider cutting something because Cenk's bringing it up, isn't that a reason for him to be involved rather than saying, this is a waste of time? I don't know.
I mean, I just hope that people are aware of what I just need people to be aware of what's going on. Like if you get like oh well, they managed to cut $50 million from the military budget and that money was like all earmarked for the VA or something. Like that's not a good thing, right? Like we want we want something. I wish that people just spoke in policies more rather than like we need to tax billionaires because we hate them, or like we need to give tax cuts to billionaires because they save us, or we need to do that. It's like what are the policies that we want to support? What do we want to cut from the military? What do we like? That's I think the more important conversations.
Cenk?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, unfortunately, this is proving at least part of Maga's point here, which is Destiny is now defending the Pentagon against cuts. Like,
did he listen to anything he just said? Like, I just like, it just went right over his head. There are cuts to be made. Express where the cuts should be made. Don't just say cuts. Because if you just say cuts, then they might end up just cutting in the human services area. They might just end up cutting in benefits. They might just, like, what do you mean? And like I think like 40 to 50, maybe even 60%, it's in that range of like our military spending ends up going to pay for like soldiers and stuff, which is not that surprising since we have a recruitment crisis. So it's like a major part. The idea that would be the area you would cut is not wild to think about. In fact, one of the solutions that is proposed is the automizing, bringing in the AI to take over a lot of these pencil pushing jobs.
That's the neocons. And then we brought in the neocons, the Liz Cheneys and the Dick Cheneys. I don't
Wait,
want
should
to
we
be
abolish our entire...
Just say where. Just say Cenk. This is easy. You talk about this all the time. Just talk about where you want to cut.
And then we brought in the neocons, the Liz Cheneys and the Dick Cheneys. I don't
Wait,
want
should
to
we
be that
abolish our
party.
entire military?
No, of course not. I'm going to tell you what to do in a second. But this idea of like, don't touch the Pentagon.
Wait. I never said don't touch the Pentagon. I just said name what you want to get rid of. I didn't say don't touch it. I just said.
So, but you're happy to are you happy to have the conversation about cutting the Pentagon first?
If you have a thing you want to cut from it, then yeah, sure.
Okay, so like you're not like, even as a general thing, you're like, well, I'm not sure about cutting the Pentagon. That's amazing to me. So why did I pick the Pentagon? First of all, I would much.
It's a very simple question. I mean, it's just like debate bro-y. I don't know if this just needs to be debate bro. I understand the framing he's trying to get. Are you on a basic level okay with cutting somewhere? I mean, it depends where. It obviously depends where. Like, if you would ask me, generally speaking, do I think there's areas in the Pentagon that should be cut? Probably, yeah. It's a gigantic budget. I think if we did an audit, we could probably find something. It'd be very difficult to do an audit, especially with how many secretive programs there are. But I'm just like circling his face. I don't know why. I'm pretty sure we can find somewhere to cut. But if I say cut and you say cut and I say let's cut here when it comes to, this program in ship manufacturing because I don't believe the construction of new aircraft carriers is conductive to America's defense priorities. And someone else says, cut the VA, cut the pay for soldiers, reduce pay, and yeah, it's gonna be very different. Or reduce, like, for example, deployments in Europe, in the Euro-Atlantic relationship, and with no alternative. Or because we haven't been able to make a plan yet for Europeans taking up those bases, or like there's asking for specifics. Should it be that crazy?
I'd rather have that than cutting social programs. But more importantly, that's where all the waste is. And that's not theoretical or hypothetical. It's real. They just failed their 7th audit in a row just yesterday. And in the last audit that they failed, they said we can't find $400 billion. Well, if you can't find it, then you're not going to miss it. So that's why I say $400 billion. In 2015, they buried a report.
Honestly, I don't know how much of that is they're actually not able to find it, and how much of it is, here's the secret program to make the new super missile, et cetera, et cetera. I have no clue.
They said they had done $125 billion in wasteful spending and didn't know where it went. Not a million, 125 billion. So they're just robbing us blind. The central area of the robbery is the Pentagon. It's not about
when we
keeping us
say
safe.
this money is gone. Is this like they can't account for it, or is this like there are certain projects that maybe an Office of Inspector General can't have insight to without clearance, so we don't know? Because you're making it sound like the money is just like what they're pocketing it, or what?
They can't account for it. They literally
Well, there is a difference, though, Cenk, between spent on stuff we don't know versus we can't account for it. Those are two different things, admittedly. And I don't know if we have visibility into, is the money gone, or are they not able to account for the program spending?
I can't believe I'm having this conversation with two people on the left.
I'm sorry. This is frustrating. There's an audience. There's an audience that is watching. You should be able to clearly state your policy. You should be able to clearly state. Like for me, I think we probably spend way too much money on aircraft carriers. Boom! There's an area. Boom! There! I did more than Cenk did. There you go. We spent too much on aircraft carriers. I don't think the future of warfare is going to be defined necessarily by aircraft carriers. I don't think we should get rid of them all, but I don't know how much more aircraft carriers we really need. Like, boom, there's at least an idea. There's a starting point for conversation, okay? Just say an area. Just say an area. The world is a crazy and dangerous place right now. I think, like, the left could really be torn in half if it's like, the Russians are marching in Europe, largest war in Europe since World War II. The Chinese are ready to invade Taiwan, and we need deterrence in order to stop it. And you just want to cut and slash and leave our soldiers gutted without ammunition to fight war. They'll tear us in half. And we need to be ready to say, no, we want to make our spending more effective, more accurate, make sure the money is getting into the right places, and that the money that is not being spent effectively, we make sure it can attend to other priorities domestically, because our domestic security and our domestic health is number one when it comes to our security. It's number one. And if we do not have that type of domestic health, whether it's social cohesion, social programs to make sure that we don't have people starving or with extremely big health problems that is economically ineffective and inhumane on a basic level, then we're not going to be able to stand up to global challenges because we're going to be too busy fighting each other or dealing with internal decay. Like, you can make this argument. You can do into the argumentation. But when you get like a question of like, okay, what do we cut? It should not be like a, what do you mean? What do we cut? Just say too many aircraft carriers. Say too many fucking submarines, or, you know, we don't need to modernize the Minuteman missile. We can roll that back another decade or something. Say something.
No, Cenk, to be clear, I'm with you on cutting. I'm with you 1,000% on cutting Pentagon.
Hello from Ukraine. I have pretty good sources of information which contain structured information in chronological order. Various documents, speeches, politicians, main figures who were responsible for bringing an escalation of the war. I could share it, but at the moment it's not translated in English. Well, I mean, if you want to share it, you can email it to me at DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com. I don't know if I'm going to go through it. I've been, I don't know how useful it would be to me, but it might be useful for other people. So you can email it to me there if you really want to share it with me.
Even would tell you specific things I would cut. My only gripe is, I don't know from what I've seen that when they say unaccounted for, it means spent on mystery stuff. I don't know that that's accurate, but I'm with you 100% on cutting.
And so when Elon asked for specific suggestions, I said, look, the reason I did the conflict of interest on the generals first, number one, every real person agrees. The only people who don't agree are, the corporate guys who are like, oh, well, of course, once we retire, we should be able to take millions of dollars from these different corporations we've been serving all along. So, but in terms of the budget, I said in my tweet, obviously you'd have to go line by line. If the Pentagon says to me, there's $125 billion in wasteful spending and we don't know where it is, how am I supposed to tell you where it is? They just told us they don't know where it is. So if you give me the details of the plan, look, this is now fantastical, right? Is there any chance that Elon goes, hey, you know what? Cenk's a businessman. He went to Wharton like I did. He's a genuine populist. All right, let's bring him in and let's look at the line items one by one and the Pentagon budget and then take out the wasteful spending. If we did that, do you have any idea how happy the American people would be? And that would be actual unity. They would love it. And we could show them, here's the waste. Here's the thing that didn't work. Here's how they spent 8,000. They did a markup of 8,000% on soap dispensers at Boeing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, are they really going to do that? Probably not. Probably they're going to say, oh, yeah, first we're going to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and everything that helps the average man, and we'll get back to the Pentagon later. That's probably how it'll go. But even if that's how it goes, now a lot of the right-wing populists go, wait a minute, I thought you said you were going to cut the Pentagon. I'm in favor of cutting them. Guys, take the win. Right-wing populists are saying cut the Pentagon. This is what we've been dreaming.
Look, the question is not about taking the win. The question should be, okay, Cenk, you would just ask for suggestions by Elon. They asked you, Cenk. They went to you. You were the man who went to Doge, okay, with Big Chungus and Can I Has Cheeseburger, whatever meme institution they're making now. And they asked you. And then when they asked, okay, what do we cut? Because it's not going to be like, we cut Pentagon in half and delete age. No. What are you going to say, Cenk? You're the guy. You're the guy. Just say something. Say anything. Just any suggestion, really. I'd accept it. Say grenades. Say we don't need grenades anymore. Grenades are stupid. I don't know. Anything. Anything.
Dreaming about our whole lives. And now you're against it. That just doesn't make any sense at all. Take the win.
I'm for it. I don't know. I'm certainly not against it. I think the question is, as you're pointing out, at the end of the day, they probably won't do it. If we get people thinking it's a good idea, it still is a win, right, Destiny?
If they cut the Pentagon?
If they say to Cenk on Twitter, we're going to consider that, and then they don't do it, and then right-wingers go, hey, you said you were going to do it, but you didn't do it. That's still a win of sorts.
That would never, you're implying a world where the right wing has the accountability for literally anything they do ever, which will
they've never done it, but theoretically.
Yeah. I mean, like theoretically, theoretically in a world where I can wave a magic wand.
So I think MAGA has changed in a way that the rest of the country and media ecosystem does not understand. So MAGA in the old days was yes, daddy, harder daddy, right? And so these days, does that wing of MAGA still exist? Absolutely. If Trump, the demigod, says something, they're going to change their position and support him completely. But there is a different wing of right-wing populists now. And I see them openly disagreeing with Trump on Israel, and on several other issues.
Yeah, but they don't have power. They don't have power. The anti-Israel right-wing populists will not have power. They're not going to get power. Not going to be anywhere closer to this administration.
So, maybe I'm wrong. And then you guys will get to say, oh, I can't believe it. You thought that there was any right-wing populist who actually meant anything and had principles. That's such a joke. They all wound up saying, no, add to the Pentagon. Let the generals take any job they want. Israel first, America eighth. If it turns out I'm wrong about that and all the right-wing populists were frauds and they all just fall in line and do whatever Trump demands of them, including following all of his donors' dictates, then okay, I'll own up to being wrong. But I think that right-wing populism does exist and it will challenge Trump on some things and probably Israel first.
Yeah, the party...
Israel first? Nah, he's on another planet. He's on Mars. No, he's on Jupiter. He's even further. He's out there.
That elected the guy who's working with the richest man in the world and has now put him in charge of a faux government agency to cut government spending as this guy enriches himself by tens of billions of dollars. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that one at all. That's an unbelievable position to actually be in. That as much as we might hate the corporate donor class or whatever, and then vote for Donald Trump, who literally received how much media coverage? Like How much did Elon spend? $44 billion to buy Twitter to turn it into a Trump marketing platform? That's unreal to me that anybody would think that something good is coming from that.
All right. Well, listen, we're making predictions about the future. We won't know today whether it will or won't happen. So let's put a pause on the conversation there. Stephen, Kenneth, Destiny, Benel II, and Cenk Uygur. Always great having both of you guys on.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks.
And that's that. And that's that. Well, I don't got anything else to say about that. That was certainly a show. Ugh. Yeah. Any questions? I'm looking at all the chats.